Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our event, and our final guest speaker, all the way from UK, very powerful speaker, Mr. Hamish Taylor, an award-winning CEO whose career has taken him from international consumer goods giant Procter & Gamble, consultancy firm Price Waterhouse, and British Airways to become CEO of the Channel Tunnel Railway Eurostar, and then CEO of Sainsbury Bank, all before the age of 40. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Hamish Taylor.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Well, good evening, I guess it is now, everybody, and welcome. What better way to finish off the day with one of my lectures on the viscoelastic properties of sodium hypochlorite. And for those of you that are not chemists, that roughly translates as, Madam, is your toilet cleaner able to last through the flush of the toilet or not? Because for the first few years of my career, that was the most exciting thing in life. Unfortunately, as you gather, I did move on to some slightly more interesting roles later on, hence the title for today. So Procter & Gamble to start with, yeah, you know, nowadays into really exciting and glamorous products like perfume and skin creams and lovely things like that. In my day, there were two products. Floor cleaners and toilet cleaners. And that's what I got. There was a glamorous end called soap powders, but I never got anywhere near that. I was kept in toilets. I thought, you know, you've got to find something more interesting, please. So I looked very hard for my next role and really wanted something far more exciting than toilet cleaning. As you can see, I failed miserably. Then moved on later on and actually fell on my feet a bit with my next role, I guess. I became head of brand management at British Airways. Really good time to be there. Mid-1990s, we got to do some really quite exciting things. I'll start my clock, actually, because otherwise I'll be going on till the middle of next week, so we'll start the clock. Got to do some really quite exciting things, like putting beds into aeroplanes. Now, you guys are in charge of huge marketing budgets, so I'm assuming that everywhere you go, you travel first class. Is that fair? Yeah, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. So, what I'm going to tell you is probably revision rather than anything new. But, you know, first class used to be a huge, big seat, a bit bigger than this one, very comfortable, lots of legroom. You can just see the seat in front of you over there. But there's two problems. Number one, it doesn't go flat, so it's kind of difficult to sleep overnight. Number two, worse, there's a stranger next to you. On an overnight flight, when you're trying to sleep and it's somebody you don't know, and it's just a bit odd, isn't it? So the beds, everybody, I mean, you know, the customer insight work said the beds were all about a nice flat place to sleep. The truth of the matter is, what was the real benefit? Privacy. You've now got your own screened off area. You can sleep in peace. In fact, so much so that I got a letter from a lady. She said, "Thank you so much for the new beds in aeroplanes, Mr. Taylor. Now when I travel with my boss, I don't have to sleep with him." I think I know roughly what she'd meant to say. Then, yes, into my first chief executive role. Eurostar, for those of you not familiar with Eurostar, high-speed trains through the Channel Tunnel linking London to Paris and Brussels. Eurostar, a multinational organisation. How do I introduce it for those of you not familiar? How about the French, the English, and the Belgians working together in perfect harmony? Now, those of you that have studied European history will know that that doesn't happen very often. And it certainly didn't happen at Eurostar. Actually, I did have the secret, though, the solution. The solution is, I am Scottish, not English. Perfect. When you're in France, just make sure they understand that. Equally important in Belgium that they know you're not French, by the way, because that can cause problems. Then I ran a bank for a while, of which a little bit more later on. And then for the last 10 years or so, I guess I've been on my own around the world, really, talking about, yes, innovation, customer, and other topics. Now, I guess the thing about these are, they're very different businesses, aren't they? I mean, some are business to business, some are business to consumer. You've got household goods, you've got services, you've got transport, banking, whatever. And they seem very different, and they are quite different, actually. And I mean, they're very, very different states of business. P&G, Price Waterhouse, BA, this was at the top of their game. Innovation for them was, how do you stay ahead? Most innovative company I ever worked for, Procter & Gamble, by a mile. Why? Because they have a very simple philosophy about innovation. If you're running, think about it when you're running. If somebody's chasing you, do you run faster? Too right you do. And that's their view. Because we're number one in most markets, we have to be more innovative than everybody else, because others are copying us all the time. Eurostar and Sainsbury's Bank, yeah, they were a bit different. These were businesses in trouble. This was rescue time. I remember my first day at Eurostar. I walked in and there was a press conference. They were announcing the results for last year. A loss of 206 million British pounds. Pretty big loss. I thought, I wish you'd told me that before I signed my contract, but okay, I understand now. Problem number 2. I don't know if you recall from the newspapers, but not long after the Eurostar was launched, there was a fire in the Channel Tunnel. There was no service for about 6 months. That fire was the day after I signed my contract to become chief executive of Eurostar. Problem number 3, the French workers were all on strike. I thought, thank you so much for this wonderful new opportunity you've given me. Actually, I'd soon discovered that the French being on strike was not a big issue. Again, if you know Europe at all, you'll know that every Thursday at about lunchtime, the French find some reason to go on strike, so it wasn't too big a problem. But there's 2 common themes. The first common theme between them is marketing. Clearly, I started off as a marketeer, I was a brand manager right the way through, and then became a customer of marketing, if you like, as a chief exec. To be honest with you, I never moved out of marketing. As far as I'm concerned, chief exec is just #1 brand manager, and that's how I saw my role. But I've had to obviously change the way I've managed that role over time, which I'm going to talk about a bit. But the other common theme is this. If you want a breakthrough, if you really want to do something different in your business, what became very clear right the way through my career was this. You've got to start looking outside the current environment. If you want to change, if you want to do something different, and you keep looking in the same places as before, the rest of your industry, guess what? You're not going to find anything different. You've just heard some wonderful stories of innovation. Did they have a history to go off with those innovations? No, they didn't. And you know, we can't work off history the whole time. We've got to find new places. Now, in new product development, it's easy, right? You know, you want to turn this into a bed. So where do you go? You go to all the people that normally design the interiors of aircraft for you. Okay, that's where we went to begin with. We went to the people that would design aircraft interiors. And what did they do? They gave us a lecture on their expertise, why they were the people that were going to invent the beds for us. And they told us about safety struts and wiring and impact resistance and fire-resistant materials. And before you know it, what have you got? 37 reasons why that will never be a bed. And it will never be a bed because we've got too much expertise and we're going to tell you all about the problems. So we abandoned that. And instead we went to a company called Design Acumen. What do? They design these things. The interiors of big luxury yachts, sailing boats, motor yachts and whatever. These guys don't deal in aircraft interiors. Their expertise is what? Their expertise is how do you create luxury but in a small space? We thought they're the people to talk to. And they were the ones that came up with the much more creative solutions for us that ended up with the beds in aeroplanes. So I thought, well, that's a nice idea. What other problem could we apply that to? Welcome to Heathrow Airport, 1993, on a good day. Now, those of you that know the British will know that there's one, you know, we have quite a lot of hang-ups and quite a few foibles, but one of our big ones is we have this total obsession in the UK with queuing, don't we? We love to stand in a line, and we like to know that the right person's in front of us and the right person's behind us, and we hate it when these nasty French people walk up to the front. Get back, get your places there, you know. We hate it. So that was a nightmare. We were losing sleep over this. This was horrible. And we thought, where can we go? Who can we get help? Pinch idea from another place? Where? Who's an expert on queuing? Well, I'd been there the year before. I'd been over to America, and I thought, they're pretty good. Now, they have the same problem we do, so why is it people like going to the bottom one, but they don't like going to the one at the top? We thought, we've got to get them in. So I brought them over, and they spent some time at Heathrow Airport with us, and you know, they were brilliant. And it was simple stuff they taught us. It was things like, right, they said, first of all, why do you have a separate queue at each individual check-in desk in the airport? You remember when airports used to do that? Each desk had its own queue. And it didn't matter which queue you got into, it's always the wrong one. There's always a family of 13 going to Azerbaijan right in front of you with 23 suitcases. Horrible. So they introduced us to the zigzag queue. One queue, you zigzag up and down. When you get to the front, you go to the first available desk. It's obvious now, it's everywhere, isn't it? You see it in coffee shops, in supermarkets, and in airports. But you know what? In 1993, not one airport in the world was doing it, but Disney were. So they just showed it to us, we stole the idea, and well, we didn't, they gave it to us, and it's been great ever since. They showed us some other little things as well, like aside from just the zigzag queue, they said, make it really narrow. They said, move the ribbons right in so it's only one person wide. We said, why? Is that to stop those French people going to the front? They said, no, it moves faster. It moves faster. You see, when it's 3 people wide, it goes like this. When it's 1 person wide, it keeps moving. Now, you've got to go 3 times the distance, and you're still in it for the same amount of time, but what's going on in your head? This queue is moving, therefore we're making progress, and even though you're in the queue for the same amount of time, complaints go down. The other thing they said to us was this, if it's going to be a 25-minute wait for everybody from here, tell them it's going to be 30. Put a notice up. And then you know what happens? They get in that queue, and when they get to the front, they're really happy, because they've beaten the system. They said it was going to be 30 minutes, but I've done it in 25. I'm clearly the best person at queuing in the whole airport. Look at me, you know. Simple, simple stuff, but we just wouldn't have thought of it. So I'm a big believer in this idea of going outside and looking for places. So although a lot of my lessons come from, yes, P&G and British Airways and wherever I've been, I'm also going to pull in some lessons from other places where I've worked. These are all clients of mine that I've worked with around the world on kind of innovation or customer type issues. And I want to talk particularly about this, you know. And the thing that's really hit me in everywhere I've worked is this. We, as a profession, marketeers, have got to take the lead role in our businesses. We absolutely have to. What's the alternative? Do you really want finance running your business? Does anybody in the world want finance running their business? I mean, come on, guys. We have got to take the lead role as marketing, and we don't always do it. And I think there was a number of things that have struck me, and these are observations. I'm not preaching, I'm not saying this is the way to do it, and you're all doing it wrong. I'm going to give you some lessons that I've learned on the way about where I think we can play a bigger role, and things that I think we should be challenging ourselves on as marketeers going forward. And I'm going to roll around a kind of model that starts off with customer insight and works through the sort of customer promise bit. And I'm going to put 4 challenges out there. 4 things that I find quite challenging that I think we need to challenge ourselves on in marketing. And the first one is this. We need to change the way we understand our customers. It's a development from where we are at the moment. Now, that might mean external customers, but I'd argue it also means internal customers. We can't sit in our little ivory tower understanding brand values and marketing and all that sort of thing. We've got to learn the language of our customers. If you can't talk about return on capital, then why are you even bothering to talk to finance department? Because that's their language. And if you can't translate what you do into their, they don't want to listen to you. So internal customers, when I talk about customer understanding, think of your internal customers just as much as your external. Now, you go back historically, what did we do in Procter & Gamble in the 90s? You know, we collected data, lots of information. We break the market down in lots of different ways, and I'm sure all of you do that as well. And that was fine up to a point, okay? It gave you an advantage. You had more information about customers than your competitors. But there's a problem. And that problem is because of men like the man that you just saw before me. Because people who understand technology invented things called computers and then things called the internet. And all of a sudden, at a touch of a button, all of your competitors can get as much information about customers as you can. It's all there. It's out there. So what do you do to get an advantage? What do you do to get better customer understanding? And that's when P&G really got into the whole area of what they call soft insights. Soft insights are to the extent to which you and your team, remember, internal customers as well as external, the extent to which you and your team have ever actually immersed yourselves in your customer's world. Spent time really working on what goes on there. Not giving the facts and figures or getting a statement of requirements, but understanding the language they use, the barriers they run into on a day-to-day basis, their story, feelings, there's a big one. Feelings. I'm an econometrician by academic training. I grew up with numbers. And I had a boss at P&G saying, how do you want your customer to feel? I'd be going, what? But it was the most powerful lesson you could learn because the soft insights become absolutely critical. But to do that, you've got to be willing to spend the time. My brand managers at BA, get out there, day a week, go and spend it in an airport, on an aeroplane. I don't care, just go and watch customers. And then 2 hours on a Friday morning, we'd sit down and we'd just talk about what everybody had seen. No survey, no data, just talk. Let's learn what we see, what we can see. And big breakthroughs come from this sort of thing. I'll show you one very silly little example, but I'm going to illustrate the point, I think, with it. Look, if I was in the UK at the moment and I were to ask the men in the audience to put up their hand if they were wearing a pair of socks like this, which is essentially a black sock to all intents and purposes, until you get inside the shoe. Once you're inside the shoe, it's got some colours on it, heel and toe, whatever. Silly colours on it, okay? About a third of the hands would go up in the UK. About 1/3 of male socks sold in UK retailers are something like this. A black sock, but then inside the shoe, funny colours. Why? Why? Did somebody do a big survey and come to the conclusion that there's a big demand for socks with stupid colours on them? No. Somebody went out and observed the customer's world. In this case, inside the house, the world of the sock, inside the household. What's the biggest problem for people inside the house when they're doing the washing with socks? Pairing them up after the wash, finding which one goes with which. Now, even I can tell that this sock is probably not a pair, therefore, with that one. A simple solution to a silly little, it's not world earth-shattering, is it? It's a silly little issue. But by solving that silly little issue, that soft insight, that little thing about the customer's world, somebody's selling a third of the socks in the UK. Marks & Spencer's the biggest seller of socks in the UK. It's about a third of their socks. If I had the franchise to do that, I would not be here today. I would be on my yacht in the Mediterranean at the moment. That is a big business. And it didn't come from some great analysis. It came from just immersing yourself in that customer's world and understanding what's going on. And that, to me, is what soft insights are about. Sainsbury's Bank, okay? Sainsbury's is a grocery chain, okay? A big grocery retailer. They launched into banking, financial products. They did a joint venture with a bank, and what did they do? They did a bit of analysis about who are Sainsbury's shoppers, their ABC1 social groups, and they understood their finance product needs, and they did lots of work. And guess what? It didn't work. They failed. What did they have? They had the Sainsbury's Bank Information Centre in the supermarket. There it is on the left. When was the last time you visited the Information Centre at your local supermarket? Have you ever visited it? Because nobody visited that. And the reason was there was still no soft insight driving it. They were working off hard data. They're ABC1, we know what their finance needs are. They came to the conclusion quickly that, okay, we do need to market to them better inside the store. So then they built bank branches in the store, like on the right there. And still it didn't happen. And the reason was they still didn't have a soft insight. The soft insight that turned Sainsbury's Bank around was very simple. What mood are people in when they walk into Sainsbury's? Think about it. When you go to do the grocery shopping, are you in a good mood? Some people do nod at this, actually, which is a bit strange. But what do most people want to do? They want to get in and get out. They know what they want to buy. They know what aisle it's in. They buy it on the basket and go. So if that's your mood, if that's your mindset, the last thing you're going to do is sit down and have a 20-minute conversation with me about my credit card offer or my loan financing. You're just not going to do it. The ice cream's melting. The children are running away. It's just not going to happen. So we had to change the model. We had to go to the bank. I had to go to the bank and say, look, I know I've only been in a few months, but just a few things about customer insight I'd like to share with you. And we had to change the model. I wanted really simple products, as easy to buy as groceries, that we could market in a totally different way around the store. You've got an aisle end display on loans going on there and a few other bits and pieces going on. Simple, simple product. Very simple products, actually. One of the fascinating ones I found was pet insurance. Pet insurance. Private healthcare for your cat. It's huge. And it's really easy to buy. You know, put it beside the cat food and people just pick it up and put it on the shelf. Ooh, £10 a month, I'll have that, you know. Crazy. I didn't, well, actually, I lied to you. I started to understand it when last year I did some work in Malta. Familiar with Malta, the island of Malta in the Mediterranean? And I was down there doing some work. And while I was away for the week, my son's pet rabbit, little bunny rabbit, cost me £300 in veterinary bills during the week while I was away. At that point, I understood why sensible people do have pet insurance. I also now understand why they eat rabbits in Malta. But anyway, that's another story. But the point of my story is not that. The point of the story is this. Look, we had to change the model. We were dumbing down the product according to the bank. We were coming out with simpler products, you know. And yet, we took the profit from 2.6 million to 23 million pounds in 12 months and we're still only in 10% of stores. That's the power of soft insights. And that's how we nowadays have got to get the advantage. Don't be wedded to your computer. It's fantastic, you can get great data, but there's no substitute for getting out there and just observing and watching what's going on with customers, guys. Honestly, it's the only way. Some of you will be B2C, some of you will be, B2B marketeers, business-to-business marketeers. Let me give you just a couple of other thoughts about soft insights that are relevant in that domain. This is Eurostar when I joined, okay? Lots of things going on, office functions, engineering depots, etc. Two things you know about Eurostar in terms of the business. Number one, it's making big losses, okay? It's £206 million, horrible. Ugh. Number two, actually the product's quite good. It's got a good service. And people having that knowledge would come and knock on my door to try and sell me on Eurostar. We'll help you reduce your losses. We're the world's greatest process re-engineers. We'll cut your costs. We'll do this. We'll do that. And they didn't even get in the door because there were bits of their knowledge that were missing that would have opened the door for them. And two bits in particular that I think are really important in B2B marketing, but actually in consumer marketing as well. And the first one is this. How much work have you done on really understanding your customer's customer? If you think what's driving our behavior, it's trying to understand our customer. What's driving their behavior? Their customer. So by understanding their customer, we understand much more what's driving their behavior and therefore how to influence them. So time spent on the customer's customer is quite important. Internal marketing, that's really important. There's no point having an argument with purchasing or procurement department if you don't understand how they're being measured or how they're being judged by their bosses, because you'll lose the argument every time unless you can play to understanding their agenda. In my case, it was very simple. It was leisure revenue was the issue at Eurostar, which we won't go into in any great detail, but it wasn't about business travel. It wasn't about costs. It was about revenue for the leisure traveller. That's what I had to fix. So if you came to knock on my door to say, I can help you with leisure revenue, boy, the door was wide open. The second one is this one, the person. And I know this is one we pride ourselves on doing in marketing, but do we really do it? You don't market to another department, you don't market to an organization, you market to a person in that organization. Have you really understood the person? Look at me, people were knocking on my door at Eurostar. What would they have known about me when they came in? First of all, they'd know my background's in brand management, okay? So that comes with all the baggage that they all assume. We all know what people assume about marketing people. They don't understand numbers, they won't do finance, won't know operation. So they know there's going to be gaps in my knowledge. Secondly, I'm 50% owned by government now. The Deputy Prime Minister is half my boss. Okay? Now, a guy called John Prescott, who was the Deputy Prime Minister at the time. Those of you that have seen photographs of him will know he's a bit big to be half my boss. He's probably about 2/3, actually. But he was, the point about it was, I know how to deal with senior civil servants in government. I've never done that before. Maybe you have. Maybe that's an entry then into how you can influence me. So you can influence me if you know more than marketing, and you can influence me if you know how to deal with government. The third way you can influence me is if you know anything about railways, because I don't. I've just come from the airlines and from toilet cleaning. And I'm now in the railway industry. So if you understand the industry, again, maybe there's a way you can help me. And lastly, this is my first chief exec job. I don't know what I'm doing, okay? So that box has always said two things to me. The first thing it says is, how on earth did he get the job in the first place? But once you're over that hurdle, the other thing it says is, look at all the ways you could have influenced him and got in the door to talk to him if you'd understood the person as much as simply understanding that he was losing £200 million. By understanding the person, it opens many, many more doors for us. And that's why, for me, yes, we need to understand the specific task and how it fits into wider goals, and we do that not too badly. But the right-hand side, for me, is critical. That's where the new opportunities start to appear, the people and the customer's customer. A couple of other thoughts on Insight before I move on. Oh, yes, this one. Yeah, this is an interesting one. That's a newspaper in Scotland, where I live, okay, the day after a big television debate between the party leaders. Cam there means David Cameron, the Prime Minister, okay, who's now the Prime Minister. What is the newspaper journalist telling you? That David Cameron had a terrible time last night on the television in the debate. He obviously did very badly, if you read the Daily Record. If on the same morning, in the same newsagent, on the same shelf, right next door to that one, you pick up the Scottish Daily Express, what do you find out? Two journalists watching exactly the same debate coming to completely polar opposite conclusions. Why? Because they went in with an agenda. They knew what they were looking for. One paper doesn't like him, so they were going to spot everything he does wrong. The other paper likes him, so they're going to spot everything he does right. And guess what? That's what they see. It happens to me every time there's a big international rugby match between England and Scotland. Scotland always lose. I always speak to my English friends a couple of days later. And whereas I'm telling them that the only reason we lost was because of some terrible refereeing mistakes, they will claim the reason that they won was because they were far better than us. And we will never agree, because we're going in with a mindset, yeah? Think about that. Every time you write a questionnaire, every time you do a little interview checklist, every time you write a list of points you want to find out in the customer's world, what have you done? You've put a boundary around the insights you're going to find, because you've decided in advance what you're looking for. So guess what? That's what you'll see. And if you keep on asking the same questions, you'll keep on getting the same answers. A bit of trend going on, but basically the same answers. Sometimes it makes, I mean, it's very valuable, but sometimes it makes sense, in addition, to go out there without an agenda and go with a blank sheet of paper and just watch. Let me understand the customer's world, and who knows what you might see. And lots of organizations are starting to do that. Specsavers, the big opticians chain in the UK, put their managers 1 day a week on the other side of the street, and they just watch what's happening in their store. And that way they pick up new information rather than the same answers to the same questions. The other thing that's quite interesting here is, don't forget that you guys are all quite senior now. And one of the problems with getting more senior in any organization is you get a bit further away from the customer, just because other things get in the way, you know. But at the same time, you're more senior. What does that mean? You've got bigger budgets and you're more influential than you've ever been. So at the time in your career when you're becoming more and more influential, guess what? You're potentially the furthest away from the customer you've ever been. And that's potentially a problem. And that's certainly what I found as I moved into CEO roles. I was too far away from the customer. And what that means to me is we've got to be as good in our organization at sharing insights and getting them into the right hands in the organization as we are getting them in the first place. There's no point in having great customer insight if the right people in the right decision-making places don't have that same insight. So if we believe we've seen something about the customer that's particularly, exciting, we've got to share it. And your mechanisms for sharing it are really, really important. It's really important. I used to get a graph once a week at Eurostar on a Monday morning telling me what happened to customer satisfaction. What can I do with that? Come and tell me some stories. Come and share what's going on. Then I can do something. It's a big believer. And this is my other silly example, actually, of where this one really puts, because this is some work I did with Hilton Hotels recently. Right. About, maybe a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, I realized that my right arm is only this long. Okay? And I came to that realization because I've been getting more and more long-sighted as I get older, and you can get the bit of paper gets further and further away, and it gets to a stage where it stops. And you can't move. So I needed reading glasses. So I got some reading glasses, okay? I travel a lot and I stay in hotels. Let's put those two bits of information together. You're traveling, you're staying in a hotel, you walk into the hotel shower room. What do you not take with you? Your reading glasses. But when you walk into the hotel shower room, what are you inevitably faced with? These things. Yeah? Everybody over 40 is nodding now. Look at this. Yeah? I mean, they're great. They've shrunk them down. They're a nice little size. They're very convenient. But in shrinking the bottle, what else have they shrunk? The writing on the bottle. I've had these 3 bottles with me for 9 months now. I still do not know what is in any one of these bottles. I haven't got a clue. So if you're in the hotel and you speak to the cleaner, the lady who's doing the cleaning or whatever, and you say, those bottles you've got in the shower room there? She says, don't tell me. The writing's too small, isn't it? I said, yeah, it is. She says, yes, lots of people say that. Oh, okay. You go downstairs. Have you had a nice stay, sir? You say to reception, oh, wonderful, lovely hotel, thank you. Just one little, not a big issue, but one little thing. You know those bottles you have in the... She says, don't tell me, sir. The writing's too small on them, isn't it? Yeah, lots of people say that. So why isn't it fixed? Why is it every hotel I go anywhere in the world, it's the same problem? I'll tell you why. Because the cleaner doesn't buy the shampoos and whatever. Neither does the receptionist. They're bought by some central purchasing unit somewhere. And because nobody's given them the message, nothing changes. And that's the problem. And actually, to be honest with you, it's had a really physical problem with me. You may have noticed I don't have a lot of hair on the front of my head. And you may think that's down to, genetics, DNA, family background, heritage, that sort of thing. Is it heck? The reason I've got no hair left on the front of my head is years and years standing in hotel shower rooms, pouring mouthwash onto my head. I had no idea what was in the blooming bottle. So get it sorted, hotels, will you, please? So look. Customer insight, yes, it's about soft insight. It's about the ability to share. It's about blank sheet of paper. It's about customers. There's lots of things we can do to develop our insight beyond what we do. And these are kind of 3 or 4 of the things that I've seen that are making a difference. And the second challenge then becomes, we need to change the platform for our activity. And by this, I mean everyone's activity. I mean, we've got to lead the change for every other department's activity. Because if we don't lead it, you ain't putting the customer at the center of your business. So we've got to lead it. Now, we all know that, Procter & Gamble would say something like, the customer doesn't care about your product, they care about what it does for them. And therefore, we all know about selling benefits. We've all heard it before. Using the benefit as your platform. If you go to consumer goods, like if you go to Procter & Gamble and talk to them about their products, they'll describe it not in terms of, they won't tell you about their product, they'll tell you about the customer benefit. Flash is about speed and ease of cleaning. Fairy is about economy. Wash and go. You remember where they put a shampoo and a hair conditioner in the same bottle. They don't advertise that as, let me tell you how smart we've been with our chemicals, and we've managed to combine a shampoo and a conditioner in the same bottle, and we've mixed them very, very carefully, and they don't. They just say, hey, see this new one? You can just wash and go. One bottle instead of two. Great convenient, yeah? Confidence, Clearasil, the treatment for skin. But the point about it is, that's fine for us in marketing, and sure, we use that kind of philosophy when we think about things like advertising or promotions or whatever. But how good are we at getting that round the rest of the organization? You know, can the rest of the organization understand what's the customer benefit of what I'm doing, and what would they need to see to understand? Because if you can come up with that statement of what's the benefit to the customer, and they'll believe it when they see the following things, that becomes the powerful tool for us. And then you think about the implications. I'm going to show you an example with British Airways, where hopefully the video is going to work. And this, I'm going to take you back, okay? The bad news is there's no room in first class, so you're going to have to come back into business class with me, okay? And you're traveling from New York to London. It's overnight. It's a short flight, 6 hours. You haven't got a lot of time to sleep. In 1988, this is why British Airways said, come and fly with us. Can we get some sound on, please? We lost the sound, have we? Oh, there we go.
This is British Airways' Super Club Class seat. The widest seat in the air. But being the widest seat in the air, it isn't the easiest to fit through the door. From May the 1st on all our long-haul routes, the world's widest airline seat. From the airline that cares about everyone that flies. British Airways, the world's favorite airline.
Okay, I'm going to freeze it there. So fly with us. Why? Because we've got the widest seat in the air. Fantastic, great, you know. We're going to spend millions of pounds all over the world telling everybody how we've got the widest seat. And it's great. Until what happens? Well, until Singapore Airlines launch a seat that's half an inch wider than yours. And then you're stuffed. Because you put all your eggs in a basket that's talking about your product. You're not talking about benefit to customer, you're talking about your product. Let me tell you about my seat. It also stops you doing other things, passenger entertainment, whatever. So at this point, BA brought in a bunch of consumer goods people. I came in from P&G and Unilever and whatever, and we were tasked with, let's make the transition. Let's build a platform for this business that's about customer benefit, not about bragging about our products. And this is 2 years later.
So, 2 years in New York, and he thinks he can tell us how to run things. Well, we won't have it.
It's all right. I've fixed things. He's traveling overnight on the red-eye. He had no choice.
Not first class.
Of course not. Company policy.
By the time he gets in, he'll be exhausted. And he won't have had time to incorporate those new figures I sent him in his report.
He'll be hungry and tired.
I've arranged for the chauffeur to bring him straight here, not to the hotel.
Like a lamb to the slaughter, gentlemen.
Morning. New Club World delivers the businessman ready to do business.
Pleasant trip.
Yes, thank you. New Club World from the world's favorite airline.
Okay, hopefully you can spot a difference there. What had happened is we've gone out, we've done some research at the top of the customer insight bit and decided when do people notice a great flight? Well, it's how they feel when they step off the plane first thing in the morning. It's not how they feel at 40,000 feet on their fourth whiskey. I mean, it feels pretty good at the time, but believe me, they'll feel pretty rough in the morning. It's how they felt in the morning. So we built a new customer promise, and it was this. We're going to be better than any other airline at helping customers arrive ready for business. That's what we're going to be best at. How would that show up for them? 3 ways. They'll get more sleep, or there'll be less hassle on the way through, or they'll get refreshed at the end. Okay? There's 9 words there. Those 9 words became the key to British Airways totally dominating transatlantic business class travel during the 90s. I know they've lost it now, but in the 90s they were totally dominant. Why? Well, first of all, because there are only 9 words. Secondly, the customer starts to listen to you. Why? Because you're now talking about them and not yourself. So I'm talking about you arriving ready for business rather than my seat. So of course they start listening. But we know that as marketeers, don't we? What I found really interesting was what the impact it had on things like innovation. Innovation went through the roof. And the reason was because we started asking ourselves a different question. We were saying, how else could you help people arrive ready for business? How else could you help them get more sleep? How else could you take hassle out? How else? So things came along like the arrivals lounge. The idea of a lounge after the flight where in the morning you can go and get a shower and your clothes pressed and your breakfast. Nobody had done that before. We were the first to do it. Within a month of opening the lounge, we were having to build an extension. It was so popular. The American Airlines used to put people in buses at Heathrow and take them to local hotels to give them breakfast because it became a must-have, because we'd set a new standard. Did we set a new standard because we were more creative? No, absolutely not. You should have seen my team. Certainly we weren't. What we did, though, was we changed the rules. And instead of creativity and innovation being about, let's look at today's product and work out how to do it better, and to help us, we'll put on pink shirts and we'll put some children's toys on the floor and we'll get the flip charts out and we'll all innovate. And then we wonder why it doesn't happen. Instead of that, just ask yourselves a different question. And that's all it was. A different question that started in the customer's world, not in ours. How else could we help people arrive ready for business? And that's what stimulated loads and loads of new ideas. But the other thing that's quite interesting for me is the internal impact. And this is where we get to this business about platform for everybody else. This is our tool to influence the rest of the business. Because once we've built that as marketing, it becomes the template for everybody else. So you go to the IT function and you say, okay, guys, yeah, you're measured on whether the systems are working and are the computers functioning or whatever. That's great. That's your normal performance indicators. What could you do about this? This is actually what we're trying to do in the marketplace. Could you help with any of these things? Our IT function had a look, looked at the less hassle bit, and that's why British Airways was the first international airline into ticketless travel. You don't need a ticket, you can just go to a machine at the airport, and nowadays, of course, you can do it on your mobile phone everywhere. Did we have smarter technology people than any other airline? No, we just asked them a different question, because marketing took the lead, set the customer promise up, and therefore provided that lead. And that's what we've got to do in our businesses. Otherwise, they'll just go off measuring themselves against their own functional specialities. And that's what we've got to get them to break out of. And we can't complain about that if we haven't painted them a different picture. So if we can paint them the customer promise picture, that gives them something else to do. And nobody's going to turn around to you and say, I don't want to do the right thing for the customer. This gives them the opportunity to do it by telling them what that is. And the other thing is, of course, it means you get many more ideas. Ideas don't have to come from marketing. They can come from all over the place. Two little old ladies used to work in the lounge at Heathrow, at New York, JFK Airport. They would greet you when you arrived to tell you where to get a cup of coffee or something when you arrive in the lounge. They called me in my office in London one day. They said, you know, you came across last week and told us about the Arrive Ready for Business promise. Well, we've had an idea about more sleep. And we said, great. They said, well, look, people come to the lounge, they spend an hour, 2 hours, you know, before their flight. Why don't we serve them their dinner when they're in the lounge? Then when they get onto the aeroplane, they'd have more time to sleep. And we thought, what an obvious idea. How simple is that? No airline did it. It wasn't the airline model. So we offered it as an option. We got 85% take-up by customers. Everybody wanted to do it. And the idea would come from some of the most junior people. Why? Because as marketing, they'd been given that core message. So that's my challenge to us is, how do we do that? How do we get that core message out? Eurostar, it made a huge difference. In Eurostar, I mentioned how it was about leisure travel was our problem. Our customer insight at Eurostar was that we'd got the customer insight wrong. We thought the competition for Eurostar, leisure this is, was the other ways to get to Paris and Brussels. What we discovered in research was it wasn't. The competition for Eurostar leisure was anything else you could spend your money on this weekend. You could go out for dinner, you could buy something for the house, or you could go to Paris for the day. So the customer promise had to change. And instead of the customer promise being all about our fantastic train set, and aren't our trains beautiful, and don't they go really fast, instead of that, it had to be a combination of that and the magic of the destination. So it was both the magic of Paris and the quick and easy journey experience, which meant the customer promise had to change into, that's the advertising line, as if by magic Paris arrived. Think about the fundamental difference that means now. You are no longer a train company. You're not in the train business. You're in the as if by magic Paris arrived business. So we had to go right round the business then and say, well, what's going to change? And obvious things had to change. You know, the product's got to change. Of course it has. All of a sudden, you've got to sell much more than railway tickets. You've got to sell hotels. You've got to sell excursion trips. You've got to sell lots of things that make the whole trip to Paris part of it. If the destination is the bit that's important, in this case Paris, we need to add new destinations. So we had to bring in new places to get people excited. Product development for us was adding new destinations on, in some ways. As far as the staff and employee side were concerned, we started off thinking, who else is interested in getting people to get to Paris in a hurry? We did a partnership with Disney. It was the best thing we ever did, because they've got a theme park in Paris. It started making us think about new partners, and it made the employees think differently. So each department was tasked with thinking about, if your role was to make, as if by magic Paris arrived, come alive, what would you do? And it was different from their normal functional measures, and they started coming up with new ideas. The call center were brilliant, actually. They used to put experts of the cities who were in the call center. So they'd have a conversation with you to try, and their job, they said, my job is to get you excited about your trip to Paris, not to sell you a railway ticket, because I know if I get the one, then the other will follow. So that's the change it makes. And that's what it does. It challenges what business you're in. And that's the challenge I put out to you guys, to put out to the other departments. Challenge them. What business are we in? And don't describe it in terms of what you do. Describe it in terms of the benefit. You know, we're not a business class airline. We're in the arrive ready for business business. I worked with a bank recently that were working with small and medium-sized companies. They've realized our job is to help that small company achieve its ambition. So we're now in the ambition business. Okay, that means we've got to have good bank products, but what other doors does it open up for them? A data supplier that now is in the decision-making business. Audit, account. Who in their right mind would ever buy an audit? You just wouldn't, would you? You're buying it because you know you have to. For what? What do you buy? Well, confidence is one of the things, for example. So you're in the confidence business, Ernst & Young, KPMG, Pricewaterhouse. And if you're in the confidence business, what does that mean? It means, yes, I want you to do a good job on the numbers, but there's other things probably there as well you could be doing to help me. And that's why this becomes this is our key to taking over the world, okay? This is our key to world domination in all of our companies, is if we can get that customer promise right and use it, I believe it becomes very, very powerful. And as a chief exec, that's what I did. I mean, that's the one thing I did in Eurostar or in Sainsbury's Bank or in these other places, was I took charge of getting the customer promise right, because then it became the way of managing all the other departments. Unfortunately, most companies don't have somebody from a marketing background as the chief exec, so they won't think to do it unless you do it for them. And then you become their most powerful ally. The third challenge, how are we doing here? I've gone 39 minutes, right, okay. The third challenge is changing the thinking. We need to be a catalyst for that. What I found was I needed people that could challenge the thinking everywhere in the business. Now, I mentioned, yes, for new product development, that's easy. We'll use a yacht designer for beds, or we'll use Disney for queuing, or whatever. But there's other ones that you can go to as well. And, oops, sorry, I'm just having a bit of a problem here with my clicker. Seems to have decided it doesn't want to click on me anymore. Is that going to go? No. It's going to go forward. Oh, there we go. I talked about yachts and Disney for one way of going outside to find other places, but there's loads of places you can go, and it doesn't have to be other businesses. These are all places I've worked with to find ideas for how you can move forward. You want to improve speed and efficiency somewhere in the organization, go and spend some time with the Coast Guard. The RNLI, as they're called in the UK, the lifeboat people. For them, every minute they delay launching a lifeboat, somebody could die. Therefore, everything they do is about speed. It's not about a process. It's about the environment they create, how they talk to each other, what they say, what they don't say, how they spot the signals to get started. You name it, they do it. And that way you learn there's many, many more ways to become efficient than just reading a business school textbook that tells you about processes. Risk and compliance in the banks. Anybody here from a bank? Risk and compliance in the banks. Okay, I can tell a story good. There's nobody. Good. Risk and compliance in the banks, the business prevention officers. Okay? The guys who say no to everything you want to do. So I took a bunch of them recently, and I put them through a training course about how to be a referee in the sport of rugby. Why? Because rugby refereeing is very different from soccer. In soccer, you wait till something goes wrong and you blow the whistle. In rugby, if you did that, there'd be no match. It would just be stop, 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 because they're all cheating all the time. So what do? I mean, I'm a rugby referee myself, which is why I know that. So what do? You play the advantage rule a lot. You talk to them the whole time. You try to prevent the issue happening in the first place. And I was trying to say there's a different philosophy here. If instead of being about tell marketing what they can't say, how about if risk and compliance's job was to help marketing make the strongest claims they possibly could? They would come at it with a completely different angle. So lots of places we can go. And then the fourth and final challenge for me is about how we engage with our customers. And particularly, I'm thinking here internal customers, because our leadership is a brand in its own right. What benefit are we as marketing bringing to the rest of the organization? And internal, I think, is probably the biggest area for us to really think again about how we engage with customers. You guys are far more adept than me at some of the external communication tools that are available now. I don't understand all this technology stuff, right? You know, I mean, it's funny, I'm thinking about brands. I mean, you know, I've got a MacBook Air, okay, which I love my MacBook Air. Why do I love it? Do I love it because I understand the number of gigabytes of whizzy bits of memory processing speed, whatever? Nah, I haven't got a clue. What I know is I open it, it comes on, it's really easy to use, and it looks pretty cool sitting on my desk. That's why I like it. Okay? So, I mean, you know, that technology bit has passed me by. So you guys know more than that. So let's talk about internal communication instead.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
Now, the easiest thing in the world would be to spend time talking about customer engagement, internal customer engagement, and talk about communication. But I'm not going to, because you guys know how to do that. I mean, you're experts at communication. I'm going to give you two other things that I think and I found quite useful in terms of this internal engagement. And the first one is to apply our expertise at writing customer promises or brand propositions, whatever you want to call them, but apply it internally. And this is this business that says, take that philosophy I talked earlier on about selling benefits and apply it internally. What's the benefit to finance of listening to you? What's the benefit to procurement of listening to you? What benefit do you bring? This is one from an HR function. And I pick on that deliberately took an HR example rather than the marketing. This was an HR function who were having huge problems in a big multinational. Everybody hated them. They were known as the business prevention officers, the guys that came along with bureaucracy. Here's the competence framework. Here's how you do appraisals. Here's what you've got to do by this date. Here's what you've got to do by that date. I'm sure it's never happened in any of your organizations, of course. But it was happening here. So they went through this exercise, talked to their internal customers, and wrote themselves a customer promise. And it went like this. As a result of HR expertise, our customers will be inspired to deliver extraordinary business and personal results. We're in the business of helping you and your team, sales department, marketing department, whatever, deliver extraordinary business and personal results. So imagine your HR function came to you in marketing and said, that's our job. How would that show up? 4 ways. Making sure that you've always got the right people in the right place at the right time. Not a bad start. Having a fully engaged and challenged workforce. Yeah, could do with that. The ability to respond quickly and with the right tools to events. And having the activities that we're doing focused on the big wins. That's the role that they set up for themselves to work with their customers on. Not one mention of HR there, not one mention of appraisals or competence frameworks, but what it was their customers saying, you do that for us, and we're very, very happy. You come and impose your bureaucracy, and we're not. So that's an example of an internal one. I would argue marketing should have one as well for every other department that says, what's the benefit to them? How's their job going to be easier as a result of listening to us? That way we'll get in the door. And the last model I'm going to leave you with for the last kind of 5 minutes of my time is another one that I found in terms of when you're trying to influence parts of the organization. And this is a little story that comes from my days at British Airways. And we had a project at British Airways called Project Interact. Now, Interact, what was that about? It was for cabin crew, okay? And the idea was that they would come out, they'd serve the meal, and then they were gone. They go into the galley, the curtains shut, and you don't see them again for the rest of the flight. Very annoying to a lot of customers. So we had Project Interact. Get out and interact with customers more. And we tried it, and everybody understood what we were doing. So we did the research, and we came out, yes, we need to get the cabin crew out interacting more. So that was the solution, was get them out to interact more. Ownership. This is the bit that says, if they believe it's the right thing to do, if they've taken ownership for it, they're more likely to do it than just because somebody in marketing or in brand management is telling them to. So create the ownership, get the communication right, and that's the communication bit. And yeah, they got that. They listened to the data and whatever. But you know what? They still didn't do it. They were still hiding in the galley for most of the flight. And I was getting a bit fed up with this, so I was on a long-haul flight one day, and the usual thing happened. They came out, they served the meal, and then they disappeared. They're gone. And I thought, well, Project Interact, time to have a word. So I got out of my seat, and I walked up to the front of the aircraft, and I introduced myself to the purser, the head of the cabin crew. Oh, he said, I heard you were on board. I thought, well, very nice to meet you too. He said, you're going to tell me to interact with passengers, aren't you? Now, I was rapidly changing my mind at this point, as you can imagine, but I said, well, yeah, I was going to say something like that. He said, I'll tell you what then, Sonny, stand over there. I said, pardon? He said, stand right there. Okay. So I did what I was told, and I went and kind of stood in the cabin. And where he had stood me was in front of the curtain that goes back out into the cabin, and he's over there by the coffee machines, kind of out of sight. So I stood there thinking, this is a bit peculiar, but I'll persevere for the moment. And while I was standing there, what he did was he leant across in front of me. He grabbed the curtain, and he just whipped it back really quickly and really noisily. So I look up, and what do I now see? 50 business class passengers, all facing in this direction. They've all heard the commotion and the noise of the curtain go back, so what do? They look up to see what's going on. And we look at each other. And what felt like about 10 minutes, but I'm told was 2.5 seconds, there's a voice over there in the galley going, go on then, interact. I did. I interacted with the curtain and shut it again pretty quickly, actually, but he'd made his point. You know, it was all very well to know what you're supposed to do, to believe it's the right thing. Something often that stops the cooperation of other departments with what we want is not that they don't understand it. We're asking them to do something different. Often the barrier is knowing how to get started. It's knowing how to take that first step. So we started introducing a third element to every project called Make It Easy, where the idea is on every project you have a Make It Easy step. What are you doing to help people take that first step? Are hot towels taken around because everybody's got dirty fingers? No. Hot towels are there as an excuse for the cabin crew to go back out into the cabin and see people. The best place I ever saw it work was cabin baggage. Right, this will come as a bit of a shock to some of you. Did you know that when you fly on an aeroplane, there's only a limited amount of space to store your bags up above the seats? And so that when you fly on an aeroplane, there are some of the bags that you take with you that are actually too big to take on board. And you really ought to be getting them tagged and put into the hold, okay, checking them in. Unfortunately, most of you have heard that, but have chosen not to believe it when you turn up at the airport. And as a result, we get lots and lots of people turning up with too much baggage. And that causes delays and cost and all sorts of things. And it's a real problem. So the solution is fix the problem at the check-in desk. Absolutely. Ownership. Can you get the check-in staff to understand that it's their job to do it? Absolutely. Yep, got it. But then you ask some poor 17-year-old young lady in her first job out of school who's got to deal with one of you lot turning up at the airport. And you've got a bag with you, and you know it's too big. Nobody ever comes along with a bag that's too big without suspecting it's at least a tad on the large size. Yeah. And we can see you coming, by the way. We know you're there. You know, walking up to the check-in desk, back over the shoulder, kind of hidden right round the back, sort of like this, you know. No, I've just got the computer bag with me today, honestly. Just the computer bag. Really, sir, you brought the mainframe computer with you. It's a bit big, that. You know, it's really tough. It's tough. So the Make It Easy bit, I claim no credit for inventing. I actually stole it from Sydney Airport. I saw it, thought it was wonderful, and spent some of my budget to bring some test units up to Heathrow in about 1996, I think it was. And it's a very simple idea, and it's the boxes that you see at the airport. Now, they've been misused horribly in the security scares and low-cost airlines, but the original idea was very simple. Sir, I would love you to take that bag on board. Nothing would give me greater pleasure. However, there is a maximum size. So I'll tell you what, if your bag fits in the box, you're very welcome to take it on board. If it doesn't, I'm sorry, we will have to tag it and put it in the hold. So I'll tell you what, then blame the box, don't blame me, all right, in the box there. Now, that doesn't stop people at the airport, of course, putting the bag in and then sort of trying to ram it in. Sort of thing. If you see anybody doing that at the airport, by the way, hang around. It's worth it for the sport, honestly. You know, got a rim like that on those boxes? Once that bag has gone in, believe me, it is not going to come out again in a hurry. I promise you. I'm convinced one day I'll see somebody walking onto the aircraft carrying their bag with the box still on it. You know, so I proved to them it would fit. Look, it went. You know. So the Make It Easy bit became quite important to us. So, I mean, what I've tried to do, and I'm just going to summarize really, is just say, look, in my observation, and please, it is just my observation, it's not preaching or whatever, one or two things I've tried to pull out that I've seen that I think as marketeers we just need to be aware of if we're really going to create the kind of impact that we want. The first one is about changing the way we do understand our customers, and I've talked about the importance of soft insights, I've talked about the ability to share the blank sheet of paper, the customer's customer. The person was another one I put in there. And don't forget to do that for your internal customers just as much as your external. Secondly, I've talked about changing the platform for the activity. And not just having a customer promise that stimulates innovation, but one that impacts on the rest of the business as well. So you can get every function. You are in control of the agenda of every other function in the business if you own the customer promise, because you've got the moral high ground now. You've got control of what's right for this business. This business doesn't exist without customers. So if you can create a simple enough customer promise based on customer benefit, it can act as an agenda for every other department. Thirdly, about changing the thinking, and that is about looking outside. I genuinely believe we've got to get better at looking at all sorts of different places to get ideas, and that's not just about product and service. It can also be about the way we lead. Go and look at great leaders. It can be about processes, as I said with the Coast Guard one. And then lastly, this business about changing the way we engage with customers, and particularly internal customers. And there, I've talked about, the internal customer promise, the thing like the HR example I showed you. I've talked about making it easy. I didn't really talk about ambition. Ambition just simply says, set the ambition in a way that when people look at it, look at what you want to achieve, they realize that the world's going to have to change to get there. If they look at it and think they can get there by doing things the way they've always done, but just a bit faster or a bit more efficient, that's where they'll go, because that's home territory, that's comfort. Our job is to get them to break out of that. Set a target, set an ambition whereby people look at it and think, ooh, that's exciting, but it's a different world as of tomorrow. So I leave you with one last story, because the clock here says I've got 5 minutes and 15 remaining, so for the first time in my entire career, I'm going to beat the clock and finish early. So I'm going to leave you with one last little 2-minute story, which says the most exciting bit, honestly, is when we get to the yellow. It's when we get to the bit about let's get people thinking about outside the box, thinking about different ideas, pinching from other places. And it doesn't have to be going and investing in researching other industries. It can be really close to home stuff. Like one of my favorite stories was my youngest son. Learned it at home, my youngest son. My youngest son is called Donald. Okay, if I'm going to grow up with a stupid Scottish name like Hamish, my children will also grow up with stupid Scottish names. And Donald was 4 years old when this occurred. He's a bit older than that now. And I'm travelling downtown in Edinburgh, in Scotland, where I live, and I'm in the car driving, and he's in the back seat, strapped in, 4 years old, in his car seat. I've got a Van Morrison CD playing. Now, Van Morrison music is kind of rock music, but uses some acoustic instruments, some folk music, and folk instruments wherever on the way through. And that's what was happening on this track. So I'm driving. Donald perks up from the back seat. Daddy, what's that sound on the radio? I said, oh, it's a kind of musical instrument that this guy uses, Donald. What kind of musical instrument? I thought, didn't get away with it, damn. How am I going to explain this to a 4-year-old when I'm supposed to be driving and he's strapped in and, oh, this is not going to work. I'm going to have to get creative. So I said, Donald, imagine for me, I said, imagine you've got a Mars bar, his favourite chocolate bar. Imagine you've got a Mars bar, but instead of made of chocolate, it's made of bright, shiny silver metal. Ugh, he went. I said, now imagine if you take this bright, shiny silver metal Mars bar, and if you put it to your mouth sideways, okay, and you blow, it makes a sound. And if you suck, it makes a different sound. So you can blow, and you can suck, and you move it from side to side, and you play tunes on it, and it's a kind of musical instrument, all right? Oh, came from the back seat. So I was driving on. I thought, well, I haven't convinced him. So I said, Donald, come on. Out of interest, why did you ask about that particular sound on the radio at that moment? He said, oh, nothing, Daddy. It's just, it sounded a bit like a harmonica to me, but I wasn't sure. Which was a very good lesson from your 4-year-old in making sure you really do start with the green. You really do start with the customer insights before you launch into your spiel about what you want to do. My customer insights tell me that you've had a very, very long day, that it's coming up for 6, about 5 to 6 at the present moment. I'm sure you've got far more interesting things to do than listening to me. So my insights tell me I'd better get off this stage. Good luck with everything, guys. Do drop me an email if you want to. Give me a call. I'm very happy to talk to anybody or whatever or about your customer promises or what you're doing. But the most important thing is marketing, and I talk about brand management, and I mean marketing in general terms, is the best job in the world. When I became a chief executive, I was just numero uno marketeer, okay? I was #1 brand manager. Don't forget that. Marketing should be leading the business, and I wish you the very, very best of luck in making that happen. Thank you for your time.
Another round of applause for Mr. Hamish Taylor. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our day. I hope you had a good, meaningful day. I would like to thank our sponsor and our supporters and all of you for being here today. And we look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you.